Okay, on to phase two of what I promised to cover, and this is just a few small thoughts about publishing papers. And again, this is a kind of talk that I don't want to claim any absolute truth. Your mileage may vary. I tend to publish in smaller chunks because when a project is complete for me, when I fill the gap that I think is worth filling, the question is answered, I don't care too much about subjecting myself and others to random demands of the reviewers and filling random requests from arguably the more selective journals. So I'm happy to finish a project and publish it in a reasonable venue where people who should read it will read it, but I don't ambitiously game the process of publishing in sort of Nature Cell Science type journals. I mean, we do submit there when we think that we have something that's worthwhile, but we don't game the publication process as much as many other labs. Let's put it that way. Okay, that's it. Hopefully the Brew workshop has been a nice view into basically the process of getting a paper together for publication, and it's a really good and useful exercise just to get all the way through to a finished product and just appreciate the pain that it takes. You know, it's like a second project compared to doing an original piece of research. It's a project to mold it into a publishable unit. And hopefully you've seen this before, where this is what a paper publication process looks like. You take your sort of blood, sweat, and tears through a ratchet of reviewers and editors and so on. And really, so there are quite natural steps of writing the paper, pre-printing, submitting somewhere, revising the response to comments, and then there's success. So it'll be a short video. I'll say some things about just my personal thoughts again. I don't claim any truth here, but this is what I think of the writing and publication process. So firstly, the important parts of the paper are the title, abstract, and figures in that order, and everything else is sort of filler. The title is clickbait, essentially. Will people look at what you've written? The abstract is a promise. So the abstract concisely says, this is what, if you read this paper, this is what you will learn. And also why this is important and what is the context for it. It's, once people click, they'll look at the abstract and they will then assess whether your paper is worth reading or not. Reading for many people these days is skimming to figures. So you have a title that's clickbait, abstract that gives a promise, and figures fulfill that promise. So figures have to deliver on the promises made in the abstract. And then once you have those three things, everything else is just setting the stage in the introduction, putting the meat around the fulfilled promise in the figures, and then discussing why it all matters, and just writing up methods of how this thing was done. So with my PhD advisor, for example, there were papers where we'd spend an hour on the title alone of the 2 hours in total that we spent together discussing the paper or the project. So that's the sort of level of attention he gave to it. And an abstract, it's also very nice to, like, once you have the title in the abstract, abstracts you can submit everywhere, to conferences, to journals and so on. And it's good to have a well-written abstract that's concise and gives a precise promise about what's going to happen in the paper. The figures are different in paper than what they are in a talk. And there's a good resource, the Broad Communication Toolkit, that I have a link for at the bottom here. I would really encourage everybody to read and internalize the lessons there for presentation figures, for paper figures, and also give a link to our lab's paper template, which is sort of 11 pages pre-filled paper that you just need to substitute in some paragraphs and words, and you have your own publication. And again, discussion, results, and methods, and intro, they sort of write themselves almost with that template especially. And so figures are nice because you usually have them already from your lab and presentations from the work that you've been accumulating along the project. So when writing a paper, I would go in the order of having the figures in place, so you know what the figures are, then writing a first version of title and abstract, and then start to write the results. And as you write the results, you'll learn that you don't have everything that you want. And then you'll keep doing experiments and you'll keep updating the figures. And once you've written all the results and you're happy that this is the work that you did and this is what it says, then you go back to give the precise title. So basically, the most powerful thing you can say about your results, the most powerful thing in those figures. Then you write the abstract that sort of builds up the promise and then delivers on the promise of the figures. Then you have the figures there to give the meat to the entire thing. So that's a meta level of how to write the paper in a way that usually saves time. If there's disconnect between, you set a title, I want to write this paper, but then your figures show something else. Either the title is wrong or the figures are wrong. And you need to go sort of back and forth quite a bit and maybe even just do another project because the title doesn't fit what you promise. In any case, we always never write to a particular journal. So we have filled the gap. So we have a project that we're excited about. We want to develop a method to do the best possible job in measuring something about the world, or best possible software for doing a particular analysis or answering a biological question. But we don't write a paper for a journal, we write it for ourselves. This is our way of communicating what we've done to the outside. And almost all journals these days accept just a PDF in any format of a paper. So I would not worry about a paper or journal restrictions at the initial stage. Write the paper that you would like to write, and then next preprint it, and only once you accept it or you have the sort of last minor revision of conforming to the journal requirements, only then I would sort of worry about that a bit. What I found really helped in writing good papers is to review early, and I'm also really glad the Brew Workshop has done this in this case. It's a different view of a paper, and you have to sort of go quite deeply. All of a sudden you see like mistakes that you yourself make, maybe quite often, but they're holding back you understanding the paper. They're holding back the flow. The language doesn't make sense. Like once you see, 3 or 4 papers that make common mistakes, and you can just avoid these mistakes much more easily in your own work as well. So I found that reviewing early has been a very positive experience, and also just writing a lot better. Okay, so you've written the paper, so you've taken the labor of your lab and cast it in a way that's shareable with others. Next thing to do is preprint, and especially in computational biology, there's very little reason not to preprint. So there are so many benefits and almost no downsides. It's visibly unique completed work, so you can put it in a CV, it has a DOI, and it's out there, it's part of a portfolio now. Like, if you're going to postdoc interviews or job interviews, it probably has a GitHub repo as well attached. It's something that it's a tangible thing. You can say that I've done this, and you have evidence for it. Which is something that's a submitted paper, or I've done this work and have some slides for it. It's just not the same thing. Once you have your work out there, you get feedback. You actually have people who are in the field reading it, giving you feedback, and we've had many fruitful discussions about our work like this. We get early citations. We also have preprint cited already. We have journals who are emailing us, can you please submit this work to our journal because it makes sense and we find it exciting. And you have people who retweet your preprints in bioRxiv, for example, and those are the people that find your work exciting. They may even add a positive comment here and there. Those are the people that you want to reviewing your paper. And also, there's up to insubstantial worry that in bioRxiv, for example, you just sort of single-click submit to your journal, which is great. You upload your preprint and say, I now want to submit there, and it goes. Maybe you need to fill in some more forms later, but it's a simple sort of one-place submission system. Because there's many reasons to preprint. Yes, your competitors may see your results earlier. They probably will have seen them in conference anyway. Again, as I explained in the previous video, I haven't, in practice, I've never experienced a downside of preprinting. So so submission review system it's a lottery. So the same paper can have, in the same journal, can have very different outcomes depending on what the lottery result is. Every submission is a coin flip. The true reasons for acceptance or rejection are often unknowable. You know, you just can. This is a game, and you can bias the game, and you can play the game, but there isn't really much you can do. So it's an external process that you don't have control over. So basically, the important thing is to keep flipping the coin and until it lands heads and you get acceptance. So the way to improve your acceptance odds is to first pick a favorable journal, and that's also it's good to read a lot. You know what the journal is that produces the kinds of papers that you have written, and usually there's sort of 2 or 3 equalish level journals that do these kind of things. There's 1 or 2 really high flying ones that, you know, if you're really lucky and you can wait for half a year and sort of odds are in your favor, you can get your paper in. There's 3 ones that are sort of solid, good journals, and then there is sort of a lower tier that accepts anything for money or nobody's heard of. So I guess, you know, at the very top, the most selective are, well, I guess Nature, Science, Cell, but maybe a couple of their sub-journals. Sort of middle are things like, in our field, bioinformatics, post-computational biology, genome research, genome biology, although the latter 2 already can be also wanting some biological results. And the lower tier are sort of, I'm not sure if lower, but the least fuss. There's least fuss like +1 and Nature Communications. Their goal is to share things, so that's fine. They exchange money for publishing. So there are also sort of businesses who make money from publishing, and there are so many journals there I would never consider submitting to. You know, if it hasn't been in the field for a long time, it doesn't have a history, it doesn't have a readership, it doesn't make sense to submit there. So basically I would always take a lower impact factor journal with nothing that matters, but just, again, it's a part of the game that you should be aware of and not be completely oblivious to. But sort of a good journal with history carries more weight often than sort of a new fancy journal that's artificially inflated their impact factor. And so basically pick a journal that has appetite for similar papers. The papers that you reference in the introduction, you can just see which journal comes up the most. And you can pick journals that have editorial board members that write some of those papers in the introduction. And then you also have to pick reviewers. You should have to pick about 5 reviewers for a paper. And again, the reviewers you should pick should be excited about the gap. So again, if a project is a gap that you fill, then there's a field that's interested in questions around that gap. So pick people who care about that answer. Pick people who retweet your preprint. Pick people whose work you build on in the introduction. Pick people that you've talked about your work at conferences. They are really positively predisposed to their field as well, to their field getting prominence. You know, it's not a competition most of the time, and even if it is, a good editor will know. Okay, so just to clarify some process, so what actually happens in the journal, I didn't know this until a couple of years ago, to be honest. So it's not like, you know, you submit something away and at some point something comes back. Submission in the journal are usually looked at by 2 editors in every journal. So basically you send them, and they usually at least do the title and abstract and maybe look through the figures, sort of like in that order: title, abstract, figures. And in most journals, so I know a fair number of editors by now, and they all have told a similar story, that they have a weekly meeting, and a weekly meeting they review all submissions. So everything that's submitted, they dedicate at least, you know, half a minute to, maybe half an hour. You know, they reject most things anyway, so those are just the editors who looked at it will just have to confirm, yep, we didn't like this, it goes. You know, they have a checkbox for what kind of reason for, and, you know, they send off the automated emails. If they don't reject, so that's called a desk reject. Basically, the editors will decide that, you know, our journal doesn't publish these kinds of things, or yes, it's a nice paper, it's within a relevant hour of research, but we don't think it's sort of big enough advance or something like that. So basically, those things. You also can't rebut later. You can't argue with the editor about their tastes. You can say that, but I think it's really important, but, you know, if they don't care, they don't care. There is no point in expending their energy there. But once you get past the first sort of editorial triage, once an editor has invested time to make it their own, to ingest it. They've usually read it by themselves by that time. They start inviting reviewers. After that, it's fair game to try to convince them to accept it. At least, well, then it's worthwhile. After it's passed the initial screening, every paper gets one editor, so one handling editor who is then going to be responsible. Sometimes there is a journal side and there is an academic side, like a professor or somebody who handles the paper, but it's usually a single editor. That person then contacts the reviewers. They can pick some of those people that are suggested, but initial ones as well. And then they wait. Not everybody wants to review papers. It may take 2 or 3 weeks just to find reviewers. And for those guys, it'll take 2 or 3 or 4 or 8 weeks to write the review. And then it takes at least another week for the editor to collate the reviews, digest them, and then to present a case at this editorial board meeting. That's a weekly one. Basically, reviews come in, editor digests, makes a case, and then they discuss again what to do, and then decisions get sent out. So this also then means that once you get to your letter from the editor about how your paper went, you have to realize that what you have to do is convince that editor that your paper is worth accepting. It's not all the reviewers, it's not all the people in the world, it's that editor. That editor has to be your ally in that editorial board meeting to say that, look, this is a good paper. Yes, these reviewers said these things, but they don't, you have to give that editor words to say in that editorial board meeting so they can support you. So basically, if you have, at any point, the editor is on your side at this point, they have invested in this paper. And if you have any things to clarify, then you can just talk to them over the phone to clarify any aspect. Usually, getting a set of reviews back is painful, at least in my experience so far. I don't know, I've published 50 papers, maybe 20 or so I've been the lead author on, and it's always painful. And usually the thing is to read them, to write an angry response, sleep on it, delete that email, and sort of get to work and actually start addressing the questions that were raised. The possible outcomes are usually reject before review. That's the desk reject. Before it's even get sent out to reviewers, the editorial board discussed and decided, look, for whatever reason, we don't like this paper. And that's just usually, we've never had a successful reversal of that decision. It's just not worth discussing the same paper again with the same set of arguments. If they didn't like it, they didn't think it was exciting, try elsewhere. There's many coins you can flip, there's many journals around. The most tricky categories are the next two. So first one is a rejection. And you look at the reviews and it looks like, they're tough reviews, they're critical reviews, but actually, we could address all these things. And then it's worthwhile to write to there and say, look, okay, review 3 is obviously crazy. So basically ignore what they say. Review 1 liked it. Review 2 had these 3 big concerns, and review 2 is good. We appreciate these concerns. We will address them. So what do you think? Would you reconsider this paper if we ignore reviewer 2? Reviewer 1 loved it. It's really exciting work. And reviewer 2, we can also make happen. Would that be okay? And this kind of email has often had success. If you really believe that actually the editor basically has gotten it wrong, instead of reject, it should be major revision, and you can substantiate that, then usually the editors are quite responsive to it. They can just say that, yes, you should resubmit, it'll be treated like a new paper, but it's not going to be treated like a new paper. So that's the key, that that editor has already invested their time and effort into taking a paper on, and it'll make a difference. The same thing is sort of major revisions where the work's not doable. So this is usually when you ask for additional experiments or something like that. And they're sort of inverted where the decision at the outset of it seems like positive, but the major revision is so big that you can't really do it. But again, it's the editor who's sort of on your side already. They have invested the time and effort. You email them or call them and say, look, you like the work, you want it published, if we can do all these things, that's great. But there's this one thing that we can't do, either technically or money-wise, or just it actually doesn't make sense. And you explain, you have a good reason for why you can't do it. But then the rest of the paper, it's still a really hugely interesting and exciting piece of work, even without this one bit that you asked. So is that okay? And basically clarify this up front to avoid, 2 extra round of reviews. Then you have major revisions that are doable. You do the work and resubmit. It'll probably be boring. You probably won't think that all of it is worth it, but it'll be worth sort of pleasure in the end. And then if you only have minor revisions, that rarely happens, and especially at the first stage. But congratulations, you can do it. Just do the small bits that are left and get over it. And regarding how to respond to reviews, so once you've established that we need to respond, have a letter. Try to make it easy for the reviewers. So the reviewers are also human beings. They're looking at this paper twice and, oh, I've already done this once and now I have to do something. And basically they have sent you their thoughts that, they took their time out of their lives to do this, and they have thoughts and sort of points. They may not have all been well informed, but even then, make it easy for them to see where you responded to their criticisms. Enumerate. This is reviewer 1, claim 1. This is your claim, make it quote. This is what we thought about it. This is our sort of discussion, and this is what we did about it. This is our action. So we use this system where you have claim, response, action. And make sure you address everything. Otherwise, you just can't get the same question again. Like there's no way around it. And if there's a difference between debating and giving evidence, always give evidence, like for everything. You can have the response reviewers itself already as a sort of live document where you have plots and everything, so that they only need to read that one document. Yes, you make the change in the paper as well, but they're not going to compare versions, see what you've done and not. Like they just want to see the response to their claims. And the tone, so basically that's called structure. You should address every point and do so in a way that it's easy for the reviewer to see. The tone, there are two schools. There are sort of combative and agreeable. We've always done agreeable review response just because we found them more successful from some collaborations. But also, it's really hard to disagree with somebody who already agrees with you. If you keep agreeing, yes, I think that's an excellent point. We can do this analysis. It shows the same result. It's difficult to argue with if people agree with you. So the tone of the conversations you might want to set is two colleagues trying to understand the world together. You're not trying to win the argument. You're trying to make sure that the paper actually reflects the world, and you're sort of in this together. You can see how some papers have open review process. I recommend eLife and molecular systems biology, for example. You can see what the reviews look like that are successful, and at least the ones that I've been part of and looked at, they're always very collegial and positive. So the responses could also be really collegial and positive. Even if the review itself sucks, it's okay. Your only purpose is to convince the editor. These are only words on the screen. Like the guy may be an asshole. It may be that they're trying to screw you over. That's okay. Just respond in a sort of professional and I don't want to say opportunistic. You optimize what you need to get the paper over the line at that stage. So basically, you say that, yes, you're right. Here's our additional evidence for whatever else you ask for. Hey, editor, we have dealt with this. He should be fine. We have addressed everything that guy said. Like that's the ideal start to review responses. Dear editor, thank you very much. We're glad that you're excited about our work, and we have done everything the reviewers asked. There are no more concerns. Like those concerns that they had, they don't exist. Basically, it doesn't. You're alleviating editors' concerns. You're not winning arguments over the reviewers. Okay, and then I know it's an example from one of our latest resubmissions. It's comment 1.1, review 1.1, and then first they make a comment. We in this case, basically just did whatever they asked, and we added a paragraph, and then go on to explain, give some plots here in the text already, and explain what it did. So basically, you can see where reviewer 1 starts. It's quite clearly delineated. Reviewer 1 points. Blue is their text. Black is our text, and the red is something, basically a short description of what the action was. And this is proving popular and just useful. And yes, so once it's done and you have written a paper in a way that focuses on a sort of core quality that you can deliver keeping the title as an important thing, and then abstract the next most important, and then figures, and then everything else just filling in as a structure. Pre-printing it early so that you have right away something for portfolio and CV, and you can take the external reward. There's nothing else that's really under your control. Submit it to a journal that's well picked, that's receptive to this kind of work, and maybe has some editorial board members who work in a similar field at least. You have responded to reviewer comments that reviewers that are maybe retweeted your paper and you've talked at conferences too. You have a paper that's accepted. You have to celebrate. Like, there's just no reason not to. Successes are rare in academia. Rejection is everywhere. Frustration, whether you want it or not, happens here and there. You have to enjoy your successes. So you have to celebrate. At the time you submit the preprint, it's under your control. Your baby is done. It's out. Hurrah! You submit. You celebrate the time of submission. It's like sending a ship out to voyage. Hurrah! It's time of first non-rejecting decisions. We got reviews back, and it's not horrible. It's probably in. Hurrah! Celebrate big at acceptance. You actually have an acceptance letter from the journal. Yes. You celebrate again when you get proof from the journal. This is what it will look like in print. It's sort of nice and official. It smells great if you print it out. You celebrate again once it's online, and you can send your parents the link. This is what I did. I'm a real scientist. Look, it's my name, scientific paper, online here, not just a sort of PDF in an archive. Obviously, celebrate when the official version is out, maybe in a paper form. Look, this is my work. And then you can also celebrate the time for a citation. Somebody else, independent review, found this piece of research somewhere in the literature and built on it, used it, made sense of it. It's an important milestone. So yes, you should celebrate a lot. And the same way dealing for resilience, and our first paper that's now cited 400 or 500 times, something like that, from our PhD, it got rejected from 6 journals before it got accepted somewhere. We got review reports, like we also had to revise and resubmit and then reject it, and like it was horrible. I think by the time we got celebrating, I think it was the proof stage. We had basically at every stage we printed out all the rejecting reviews, and basically did dramatic readings of will probably be your field, that basically we had stored the haters' fan mail, and basically owned it. Yes, there are many people along the way. Tens of reviewers who maybe didn't agree with everything, but now we have sort of hundreds of people who use our software and use our models. So it feels good to be vindicated, and basically you do what you need to fuel the energy to get you through the publication process. I don't like the process myself. I think it's sort of archaic. I don't think we need this kind of gatekeeping at this stage of the science enterprise, but it's there. It matters for your careers, and again, if you don't play the game, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. It's good to keep submitting. Well, you will just keep cranking the wheel. Submit, you get responses, sleep on it, revise, resubmit, and keep doing it over and over and over again. And ultimately, your papers will be published, and basically that'll be another notch on your productivity belt. Anyway, I look forward to discussing also these aspects with you during the brew, and I look forward to meeting you all. I think this is the last slide. Ah, yes. Just a final view that I really recommend the Broad Communication Toolkit for getting papers into shape, and our paper template. And it's a tough road often, but it's clear, it's fairly straight, and it's also mechanical. You don't have to think that much, to respond. You have a list of journals you want to submit to, pick the first one, submit, respond to reviews. If you success, great. If you fail, go to the next journal, submit. Like it takes time, but so what? Like every paper that was submitted has always been published somewhere, so it's okay. Yeah. So good luck with all the submissions.